Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very sorry that I'm not in Coimbra today due to some other compromises. And well, my role here was to make a brief history of ethics. It's a little bit difficult to make it, but I'll start with the concept. As you know, the concept of ethics comes from the ancient Greek ethos, and it's very interesting that it is possible to write this word ethos or ethos with two. You know that there are two different letters in ancient Greek. So brief e and the long e there are two different e's in Greek, and there are two different words with these two different e's to say ethos. So we have ethos and ethos, and they mention they express different things. So ethos with brief e means a costume, an habit, habits, and ethos, which is very interesting, means home. And there is a sentence from Heraclitus, a fragment, so it's number 119 of the collection of the ancient Greek fragments from Deals, from Heraclitus, that goes like that: ethos anthropodaimon. That means it's written with a long e, so home. It's a kind of enigmatic sentence. It says ethos anthropodaimon means the home, our home. For human beings, home is a daimon. So this is the first definition of ethics we can find. So this home, so the place where we are, where we live. So our place in the world is. And then comes this word, is a daimon. What is then a daimon? A daimon is some kind of god, which is an intermediate between human beings and gods themselves. So daimon is this figure, this semi-god, so to say, that that is able to bring human beings to a better life. And this is what ethics at the beginning means. So the question, the original question of ethics is not what shall I do in some or other situation, or what I ought to do in some kind of situation, but it's something more fundamental, I would say, which is how should I live in order so that how shall I live in order that my life becomes a better life, not a better life in a banal way, but a better life in the sense a more divine life, so to say. And this has to do with the Greek word of happiness. I was talking about the daimon, and happiness in Greek is written eudaimonia. That means to have a good God, to have a good spirit. So happiness, in this sense, is to make myself some to make of my life something more, so to say, divine, as I was saying. So my point is, the first question of ethics is not what shall I do, is how shall I live? How shall I live? How is it possible to make my life getting a more deep sense? How to make my life something meaningful, so to say. So happiness is the central concept of ancient ethics, happiness. And for instance, if we read Aristotle, the first books of Aristotle on ethics, we find that what he is talking about is not the problem how to behave or what to do in different kinds of situations. Is something else. It's something that has to do with how to find ways of living my life as a happy life. And in many passages of his work, Aristotle defines three ways of making life meaningful. He says, well, one possibility of living our lives is according with pleasure, hedony. So I shall live according to this idea of getting more of getting as much pleasure as I can have. That would be a possibility. The second possibility he mentions is I can live my life according to another criterion, not pleasure, but honor. And in my relations with others, so in my, so to say, political relations, I shall try to be an honorable man. So that's another possibility. The third possibility he mentions is very interesting, is the origin of the word theoria, theory. And he says, well, I can live my life as a we could translate it as a contemplative life. I can learn to see things as they are. And this is the most philosophical way of living our lives. See things as they are, to contemplate. So Aristotle, when he considers the concept of happiness, so as I said, happiness, good spirit, he considers these three ways of living my life. So life according to pleasure, life according to honor, and life according to thinking. And of course, when he talks about that, he says, he asks, well, is it possible to make a distinction? Is that possible to make a hierarchy between these kind of lives? And he says, well, yes. According to what? According to the independence, according to the Greek concept called autarkeia, according to independence, this way of life gives to the one that practices its ways. For instance, if I live according to pleasure, so if pleasure is my is a value that is more important to me, it means, since I am not the origin of the pleasures I can have, that I'm always dependent on people and on circumstances that possibly will give me pleasure. For instance, if I'll be happy, if the meaning of my life would be to have lots of money, to, for instance, to win the lottery, that it doesn't depend, this circumstance does not depend on me. So of course, I can win it and then I'll become very happy, but it's not dependent on me. It doesn't depend on me that I'll win it or not. So if I living, for instance, if my life depends on being loved, for instance, for someone else, my happiness depends on this someone else, not on me. So it means that living according to pleasure means not to be independent, means not to be, means that our happiness depends on circumstances and on circumstances that we can't control. So Aristotle says, well, this is not a good way of living our lives, to become dependent on circumstances that we can't control. So pleasure should not be our main value. And the same goes to honor. If for me to be honored by the others would be the most important value, that would mean that I would be dependent on the others in order to become happy. If the others praise me for, or love me for being what I am, that would be, it's fine. So but if they don't, it means that I will that I would be condemned to be unhappy because of the others. So these two values, pleasure and honor, they are good things. They are things that we shall pursue, but they shall not be our main value. So what should be our main value? How should we live? And the answer of Aristotle, and that's his first answer in the history of ethics, ethics is the pursuit of virtue. And then we find the other, a very important word here, a very important concept in the history of ethics: virtue, arete, virtue, excellence, virtue. That shall be what we shall pursue. Why? And then the question is, what actually is a virtue? Of course, I can say, well, my happiness consists in being virtuous. That shall be what ethics is about. Ethics is about being virtuous. But what is actually a virtue? And here, the philosophical approach, I think, is very interesting. And all in ancient ethics, all philosophers converge on this idea. Plato, Aristotle, the Stoician, etc. They converge in this idea. A virtue is a kind of practice that has its origin in this kind of practice, a kind of practice that transforms our, saying this in ancient concepts, that transforms our soul. I mean, our psyche, our self, so to say. How is that so? For the in ancient philosophy, we shall always make the distinction between what is natural. So we have, as human beings, some natural qualities, and we have other things that by nature are unnatural for us. For instance, I'm not blind, so I naturally see. This is what I think. So being able to see is something that is natural to me because I have the dunamis, so the power to see. So the act of seeing, the practice of seeing, is the actualization, is the realization of my power, or my potence, my power to see, this dunamis. So I have a lot of natural qualities, and these natural qualities means that I can dispose of this, so I can have this practice. So I can see, I can walk, I can. So these are natural qualities. But there are other things, other abilities that I, by nature, don't have. For instance, to fly. I'm not able to fly. So flying is something, a practice, is something that is unnatural to me. So I'm not able to fly. I'm not, and it means, because it contradicts my nature, it means that flying is something that I will never learn how to do. It's not possible for us to learn to fly, because flying is something that is unnatural. So we are beings that are in the middle of these natural qualities and unnatural qualities we have. So we have some natural qualities, and we don't have these other qualities that are not possible for us. So it's impossible to learn how to fly. But the virtue is something that it does not correspond to a natural quality. So no one is naturally virtuous, but it's also something that I can acquire. It's not something that is unnatural for me. For instance, let me take a traditional virtue, courage, for instance, to be courageous. Courage is not something that I'm born with. No one is naturally courageous. So the natural reaction I have if I see some group of criminals running towards me is just to leave. It's not to face them. So I'm not naturally courageous. But it doesn't mean that courage is unnatural to me, in the sense that courage is not like flying, because I will never learn how to fly, but I can learn how to be courageous. How do I do that? How do I become courageous? By practicing acts of courage, by step learning how to be courageous. How do I do that if I'm not naturally courageous? And then Aristotle said, well, I live in a community where I share my life with those, or with people who are already able to practice these virtues, because they are already virtuous. They are older than me, for instance, so they can share with me this practice. And that is something very interesting for ethics, because in ancient ethics is a communitarian practice. No one is ethics is not something that has to be with individual. Ethics is not something that has to be with a lonely consciousness. No, practice, ethics is something that has to do with a communitarian ethics, where virtues are transmitted from generation to generation, where new generations learn how to practice, how to be virtuous, how to the new generations they are in this way educated as virtuous. So ethics has to do with community and has to do with education, has to do with this transmission of virtues. So this is the realm of ancient ethics. It is a communitarian practice. It has to do with transform ourselves. So you see, it has. Let me just go back to this idea, because there's something important that I didn't say. So I'm not virtuous only by practicing once some virtue. For instance, if I have an act of courage, once in my life, it doesn't mean that act doesn't make of me someone courageous. In order to become virtuous, in order to acquire virtues, I have to practice, and this means to repeat in a long time, to repeat these kind of actions. I have to get used to be this way. So ethics has not to do, ancient ethics has not to do only with one act, one single act. Ethics has to do with life, with the practice of life that is extended in time and during time. It takes time in order to acquire virtues. It's not something that I can only resume in one day or in one act. Ethics has to do with this. This is why I started to say that it's not the question of ancient ethics is not what shall I do. It's the question is of ancient ethics is how shall I live? How shall I follow my life? How shall I live along the time I'm here in this earth, so to say. And that is very deep when we see both, when we look at these texts, both by as I said, by Aristotle or Plato or Seneca, or so all ancient philosophers share this idea of ethics. Ethics is a practice of virtue. Ethics is the possibility of acquiring some kind of second nature, so that I transform myself. When I transform myself through the practices, so the practices of my life, so acquiring these virtues, so I'll not be the same person I was. I'll be some kind of different person by having some kind of second nature. And this is really the meaning of virtue. So virtue is according to Aristotle, the disposition, hexis, the disposition of acting according to virtues. Of course, the same process go also to bad qualities, to vices, so to say. If I was saying, well, I'll not become courageous only by one act of courage, so I have to practice courage in order to become courageous. The same ways goes say to bad qualities or to bad practices, so to say. That is just, I'm not making any moral judgments on that, but assuming that smoke, for instance, smoking is bad practice, I would say the same goes to smoke. I don't become a smoker only by smoking once in my life in a party. I would say no, I became a smoker by practicing consistently and repeatedly the act of smoking. That's how someone becomes a smoker, by practicing during time the act of smoke. So this is the horizon of ancient ethics. So, and let me repeat, ethics has not to do with a single act or moral dilemmas, etc. Ethics has to do of living our lives and to think how we should live our lives. But then we can find, and now we are going to make a very big jump to modernity. We can see another approach to ethics. And this other approach will start from an individualistic point of view. So if we take the concept of the modern subject, the rational subject, of course, we catch the problem of ethics in a very different way. And this way puts the following problem. So I am a subject in a world, and I have in my relation to the world two different ways of leading with the world. The first way could call a theoretical way. So in my relation with the world, I know the world. So knowledge, and to ask, and I can ask, how is it possible that I have something that I can call knowledge of the world? That's a theoretical problem. How can I know the world I have in front of me? But with this world, I don't have only a theoretical relationship. So I am not only some subject of the vis-a-vis the world, but I deal with world. So I act in the world. So I interact with the world. So it means that I can approach the problem of practice in a very different way of from the way that of this ancient ethics. So when I put the question of ethics in modernity, so to say, the question is not anymore the question about how shall I live, how shall I live my life, how to get my life something meaningful, how to make my life something meaningful. But the question now is, what shall I do in a concrete situation? And here we in this second approach, normally in the history of ethics, the more important author is Kant, with the idea of that the rational subject has what he calls categorical imperatives that shall rule his relation with the others and with the world. So ethics in this second approach has to do with norms of behavior. And that is the most current meaning of ethics nowadays. When we talk about ethics, normally, we talk about rules, we talk about norms of behavior, we talk about ways of regulating our engagement with others and with the world. And in the Kantian approach, there is a very important distinction between what he calls the categorical imperative and what he also calls the hypothetical or conditional imperative. Let me just, this is a very basic distinction, but this is important. If we consider from a Kantian point of view all what I said, all that I have said about ancient ethics, if we consider that, Kant would say that all ancient ethics has nothing to do with morals, with ethics, so to say, because actually the ancient way of considering ethics is instrumentalizing ethics. It means that the rules that we follow in seeing how to behave have to do in ancient ethics with the idea that I do things in order to become something else, in order to become happy. So happiness would be the main goal of ethics. And all what I do it in order to become happy, in order to become, so it's what Kant will call conditional or hypothetical imperative. So to say, be courageous in order to be happy. Don't smoke in order to be healthy, etc., etc., etc. So according to Kant, it doesn't have these hypothetical imperatives, they don't have to do with ethics, because the rule, the commandment, the imperative has not an absolute value. It is only justified in order to justify something else, in order to arrive to something else. So Kant, he reformulates completely the realm of ethics, saying that ethics has to do with norms, and norms are not hypothetical imperatives. They are categorical imperatives. So they are not, in order to have a moral imperative, the imperative shall not be conditional. It shall not be something that is followed in order to get into another purpose. It shall be justified in itself. Why? Kant argues, because it is absolutely rational to do that. It's what is the basis of the unconditional imperative, so the ethical imperative, according to the Kantian view. The basis is universality. I shall do that independently of any circumstances, because it is rational to do so. So in the history of ethics, we move from an idea of ethics that has to do with life, with the meaning of life, so to say, with the answer or the pursuit of an answer to the question, how shall I live in order to have, how should I follow my life? How should I have my life in order to have a meaningful life? We move from this perspective to the perspective of ethics as something that has to do with norms that I apply to life. And these norms shall be, because they are, or they should be completely rational, these norms shall be unconditional. That is the Kantian point of view. Of course, there are, after Kant, some ideas that try to conciliate these perspectives. So the ancient perspective and the modern one, so the Kantian one. And then we arrive to a third concept, which is very important, is the concept of utilitarianism in the history of ethics. All the ethics nowadays has always this component of utilitarianism, so consequentialism. It means that these values that Kant thought as absolutely and purely rational, utilitarianism will say, no, these values have to do with the consequences of those values, and of course it means that there are some it's not ethical, says utilitarianism, it's not ethical to approach to norms as something that are absolutely or universally valid, independently of consequences and independently of their consequences. Now, in order to have norms, utilitarianism argues, we have to measure the consequences of following those norms, and we have to measure those norms with the circumstances where we shall apply those norms. So, and what we have here is, and I would say nowadays is it's always the when we talk about ethics, it's always the perspective of conciliate somehow these two perspectives on ethics. So a Kantian approach on the one side and a utilitarian approach on the other side. From these essays or different essays of conciliate those perspectives, we have different kinds of approaches to ethics nowadays as something that want to deal with applying norms to reality, applying norms to concrete situations, applying norms in their possible universality, so to say, and with their possible norms in their, I would say, constitutive rationality to concrete situations where we have to conciliate those the universality and singularity. And from this point, we arrive to the fourth concept and last concept I would mention here, which is the concept of value. So norms, when we try to approach norms in order to conciliate norms, abstract norms, with reality, with life, so to say, we have the problem of values. What values shall we follow? Are values what are values? There are, of course, different values. How do we conciliate values which are conflicting among each other? So this is a problem of ethics nowadays. How to conciliate norms and reality, how to do with values, with different values. Values are, in a way, we could say, perspectives on the world. And our relation with the world is a relation which has always, with its background, as its background, a perspective on this world. There are no objective, so to say, or purely objective relations with the world. There are always perspectives. As Nietzsche says, which is a sentence that is very complicated in a way. Nietzsche, but this is an expression of Nietzsche, although we have to have some to have some, to be careful with this use, because it can move us for ideas which were not the ideas of Nietzsche. But as Nietzsche said, there are no facts, actually. There are only interpretations of these facts. We live our common world, our common relationship with the world is based on interpretations of facts. So actually pure facts is something that do not exist. It doesn't mean that facts are reducible to interpretations, but it means that the human world is a world made of both facts and interpretations. There are no facts on the one side, interpretations on the other side. No, there is, our human world is a world where the world itself is shared both by facts and interpretations. And this has to do with values. It means that we cannot avoid the question of values. And the problem of ethics nowadays, I would say, is how to conciliate, how to recognize, how to live with different values. Because, of course, in a world which is a global world shared by very different perspectives on this world, of course, different values share this world as well. And there is a common world where we have to conciliate different values. Of course, we have in this sense two basic attitudes towards other values. When in the middle, there are many attitudes, but there are two different main attitudes we can have. We can cancel the values we don't understand or we don't share. We can actually try to live in a world where these different values have no place. This is one possible attitude toward these different values. The other attitude has to do with a word, or two words actually, from the German that I think it's very important to mention them. They are philosophically very important concepts. The first is recognition, the Anerkennung, recognition. We don't have to share these values, but we have to recognize these values as perspectives on the world that share the world with us. And the other is a very interesting word, and I shall finish by mentioning it, which is the word Achtung. Achtung is a very interesting word because it's different, I think, in Portuguese certainly, but I think in English it's difficult to get to the possibilities of the concept of Achtung, because Achtung means both attention, to make attention to something. For instance, for those who visited or visit Berlin, for instance, all these postcards saying, Achtung, Sie verlassen West Berlin. Attention, you're leaving West Berlin, for instance. Achtung, attention. But the other meaning of Achtung is respect. For instance, when Kant speaks about respect of moral law, the word in German is Achtung, which is in the original is Achtung. So Achtung means both attention and respect. In order to pay attention to something, I have really to make some respect in to have some respect towards it. For instance, I cannot pay attention to something. For instance, if I have my mobile phone here, I cannot see it. I have to make some distance, to open some distance between me and the mobile phone. Excuse me for the example, stupid example. But this is the condition or the precondition. So this distance, this openness of this distance is the precondition for respect. And I think this is the basis of nowadays ethics, which is, I would say, which is in many situations, it gets forgotten. It gets one forgets this idea. In order to share the world with different values, we have to have recognition and respect. So I would finish here. Thank you very much. I don't know if there will be any questions, but thank you.